Hi, welcome to the quiz. You can answer along on quizalto.com, all for free. The exact URL of this quiz will be in the notes down below. Let's get started. Good luck. What type of compute resources can be included in an AWS Batch compute environment? Only reserved instances. EC2 instances, including on-demand, spot, and reserved instances. Only spot instances. Only on-demand EC2 instances. AWS Batch compute environments can include various types of EC2 instances such as on-demand, spot, and reserved instances, offering flexibility in cost and resource management. In AWS Batch, how can you control the order in which jobs are executed? By setting job dependencies and priorities. By specifying different IAM roles. By using different S3 buckets. By assigning different instance types. You can control the execution order of jobs in AWS Batch by setting job dependencies and assigning priorities within job queues. What is AWS Parallel Cluster and how does it relate to AWS Batch? A database service for batch jobs. A monitoring tool for job performance. A storage solution for job outputs. A tool to deploy and manage HPC clusters that can integrate with AWS Batch. AWS Parallel Cluster is a tool for deploying and managing HPC clusters on AWS, which can integrate with AWS Batch to handle job submissions and executions in an HPC environment. Can AWS Batch integrate with other AWS services? Yes, but only with Amazon RDS. No, it operates independently. Yes, it integrates with services like Amazon S3, Amazon ECS, and IAM. Yes, but only with AWS Lambda. AWS Batch integrates seamlessly with other AWS services such as Amazon S3 for storage, Amazon ECS for container management, and IAM for access control. What is AWS Batch used for? To monitor AWS resources. To manage databases on AWS. To run batch computing workloads on AWS. To host websites on AWS. AWS Batch is a managed service that helps users run batch computing workloads efficiently on the AWS cloud. What does the term vCPUs refer to in AWS Batch? Virtual Centralized Processing Units. Variable Compute Performance Units. Verified Compute Performance Units. Virtual Central Processing Units. vCPUs in AWS Batch refer to Virtual Central Processing Units, which are used to specify the compute capacity for jobs. What is the significance of the ulimit parameter in a job definition? To configure the network settings for the job. To set resource limits for the job's container. To specify the IAM role for the job. To define the instance type for the job. The ulimit parameter in a job definition sets resource limits, such as memory and CPU usage, for the job's container, ensuring controlled resource consumption. How can AWS Batch improve cost efficiency for batch processing? By using fixed pricing for all resources. By utilizing spot instances and scaling compute resources dynamically. By avoiding the use of EC2 instances. By limiting the number of jobs submitted. AWS Batch improves cost efficiency by utilizing spot instances, which are often cheaper, and dynamically scaling compute resources based on job demands. What is the function of a job array in AWS Batch? To store job outputs. To run multiple similar jobs with a single job submission. To prioritize jobs. To group different types of jobs together. A job array allows users to submit multiple similar jobs with a single submission, efficiently managing and executing large sets of jobs. What is the maximum number of array job children that can be created in AWS Batch? 1,000. 10,000. 50,000. 5,000. AWS Batch allows for the creation of up to 10,000 array job children, enabling the efficient execution of large sets of similar jobs. How does AWS Batch handle job scheduling? It requires manual provisioning of compute resources. It uses a first-come, first-served approach without resource management. It automatically provisions the right quantity and type of compute resources. It does not handle job scheduling. AWS Batch automatically provisions and scales compute resources based on the job requirements and scheduling policies. What is a key benefit of using AWS Batch for batch processing? Static IP addresses. Dedicated EC2 instances. Preconfigured data pipelines. Automatic scaling of resources. AWS Batch provides automatic scaling of compute resources, allowing it to efficiently handle varying workloads without manual intervention. How does AWS Batch ensure efficient utilization of spot instances? By using spot instances only for job arrays. By avoiding the use of spot instances. By exclusively using spot instances for all jobs. By seamlessly integrating spot instances into compute environments and managing interruptions. AWS Batch ensures efficient utilization of spot instances by integrating them into compute environments and handling interruptions and reattempts automatically. What is the AWS Batch console used for? To set up Amazon CloudFront distributions. To configure Amazon RDS instances. To deploy AWS Lambda functions. To manage and monitor batch jobs, job queues, and compute environments. The AWS Batch console is used for managing and monitoring batch jobs, job queues, and compute environments, providing a centralized interface for batch processing tasks. How does AWS Batch handle job prioritization? By using job queues with assigned priorities. By the type of compute environment. By the size of the job. By the order in which jobs are submitted. AWS Batch handles job prioritization by using job queues that have assigned priorities, ensuring that higher priority jobs are scheduled before lower priority ones. How can you monitor the performance and status of AWS Batch jobs? By using Amazon CloudWatch and AWS Batch Dashboard. By setting up SNS notifications. By manually checking each EC2 instance. By creating custom scripts. You can monitor AWS Batch job performance and status using Amazon CloudWatch for metrics and logs, and the AWS Batch dashboard for a comprehensive overview. What does the term compute environment signify in AWS Batch? The resources available to execute batch jobs. The IAM roles associated with batch jobs. The storage location for job data. The network configuration for job communication. In AWS Batch, a compute environment defines the compute resources that are available to run batch jobs, including EC2 instance types and scaling settings. What is the role of the AWS Batch scheduler? To manage S3 bucket permissions. To monitor EC2 instance health. To deploy web applications. To assign jobs to compute resources based on priority and resource requirements. The AWS Batch scheduler is responsible for assigning jobs to compute resources based on the job's priority, dependencies, and resource requirements. How does AWS Batch ensure high availability of job execution? By using a single availability zone. By using AWS Direct Connect. By distributing jobs across multiple availability zones. By relying on on-premises resources. AWS Batch ensures high availability by distributing jobs across multiple availability zones, reducing the risk of a single point of failure. What is a common use case for AWS Batch? Social media analytics. Scientific simulations. Real-time video streaming. Mobile app development. AWS Batch is commonly used for scientific simulations, which often require processing large volumes of data and complex computations. How are compute resources defined in an AWS Batch compute environment? By defining S3 bucket configurations. By setting up RDS instances. By creating EC2 launch templates. By specifying instance types, maximum vCPUs, and AMI IDs. Compute resources in an AWS Batch compute environment are defined by specifying instance types, maximum vCPUs, and optional AMI IDs. What is the role of a compute environment in AWS Batch? To manage network traffic. To provision and manage the compute resources needed to execute jobs. To create security policies. To provide storage for job data. A compute environment in AWS Batch manages and provisions the compute resources that are needed to run jobs submitted to job queues. What is AWS Fargate and how does it relate to AWS Batch? A storage service for batch jobs. A database service for job logs. A monitoring tool for batch jobs. A serverless compute engine that AWS Batch can use to run containerized jobs. AWS Fargate is a serverless compute engine that AWS Batch can use to run containerized jobs without needing to manage underlying infrastructure. How does AWS Batch handle failed jobs? By automatically retrying them based on the job's retry strategy. By running them on a different compute environment. By canceling all other jobs. By ignoring them. AWS Batch handles failed jobs by automatically retrying them according to the retry strategy defined in the job definition. What does fair share scheduling mean in the context of AWS Batch? A strategy for reducing compute costs. A scheduling policy that distributes compute resources evenly among jobs. A policy that prioritizes long-running jobs. A method for setting static resource allocation. Fair share scheduling in AWS Batch is a policy that ensures compute resources are distributed evenly among jobs, preventing any single job from dominating resource usage. And that's a wrap. Thanks to everyone who participated. Remember, you can answer along on quizalto.com, where you can keep track of your progress and find much more quizzes. We hope you had a fun and challenging time. Until next time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as we upload. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts or suggestions, and if you think this video is worth sharing with someone who could benefit from it, please forward a link to them. See you next time. Thanks for watching.